Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for running our webinar programme. So in today's webinar, we'll be hearing from Junior Morell, Help Desk and Customer Liaison Manager at Marsworth Computing. We're very grateful to Marsworth Computing for running this webinar for us. The Marsworth Group was founded in 1988 and it provides a high-quality computer management and consultancy service to professional firms, commercial companies and schools. With over 30 years in the IT business, looking after corporate and end-user interests, Junior has seen firsthand how failure to apply good cybersecurity practices can leave a business exposed and decimate years of hard work. He has been involved in the IT services and help desk delivery sector from North America to EMEA region for two of the largest blue chip companies on the planet, where he has received customer service awards for his skills. In his talk, Junior will be explaining why cybersecurity is important, including how it relates to GDPR, and bringing us up to date with cybersecurity best practice. As usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end, and this time we're lucky to have both Junior and Paul Salter, who's the Ops Director at Marsworth, available as well to answer our questions. So do please type in your questions in the question box as we go along, and I'll read them out when Junior has completed his presentation. We're really grateful to Perspective for sponsoring this webinar. Perspective Research Services provides help at every stage of the data journey as an end-to-end experience or simply to dip into when needed. They operate one of the largest independent call centres in the UK and state-of-the-art viewing facilities in the heart of London. They provide qualitative recruitment, face-to-face fieldwork, B2B mystery shopping and data processing services. Before I hand over to Junior, here are the next webinars to note down in your diaries. We have one more really exciting webinar coming up next week on the semiotics of racism before we take a short break for Christmas. We'll begin 2021 talking about IR35 as Liz Norman has kindly agreed to update us on the new regulation that comes into effect in April and how it might affect us. You can sign up now for both of these webinars from the events page on our website, theicg.co.uk/event. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £100 for a lot of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more. So our speaker today is Junior Morell from Marsworth Computing Limited, and I'll now hand over to Junior. Junior, we can see you, we can't hear you.
There you go. I'm good. It says that I was muted by the presenter, so I'm good to go. Hopefully you can see me and you can hear me now. This is absolutely fantastic. I am Junior Morell. I am from Marsworth Computing, and I have the wonderful privilege of delivering this webinar to you today, which is about a very important subject indeed, which is cybersecurity. The thing about cybersecurity is that it's normally perceived quite often as somebody else's responsibility. We're going to look at that to see whether that's the case. Now, this webinar is loosely based around the Cyber Essential certification that you can acquire either for yourselves or for your business. And it's good to have it because this then conveys to the people that you deal with, clients and otherwise, that you take cybersecurity seriously, and it certainly will increase their confidence in dealing with you as a business or as an individual. We actually label this as the ground floor because it is a basic overview. You can just imagine that cybersecurity is a very broad subject indeed, and it would take a lot longer than the time that we're allotted here to be able to discuss with you the real ins and outs of cyber security. My background is, as been mentioned, I had the opportunity to work with two really of the largest blue chip companies on the planet, delivering super services for companies that you know very, very, very well, people who take their security and their branding very, very seriously. So I have the wonderful privilege of sharing with you some of the important things that they consider really that needs to be catered for and looked after when you think in terms of cyber security. So I just want to go to really just bring up really which is our talking points. Our talking points for today, we'll be looking at what is cybersecurity, really the cost of poor cybersecurity, the current attack state play, what's currently out there, what you've got to put up with. We'll look at a few numbers, not many of them. We'll touch on some threats. We'll look at some solutions, certainly best practice. You want to pay attention. We certainly want to focus on that. And responsibilities, because you as a data handler, small business, individual, running a business, if you are handling data, cybersecurity is very, very important. You want to pay attention to that as well. And then where you can get some help. It's all very well knowing what you're up against, but where can you get some help to cope with the things that you have to deal with as a business? Whether you're a small business, you're an individual, you're medium sized, you're corporate, where can you go to get some help? And then we're going to wrap this up with a Q&A, as we said, from Paul Sauter, my colleague Paul, who's there, and he's going to take some of your questions. Okay. So the first slide that I want to put up really is this one here, which speaks about the European Agency really for Cybersecurity in ISA. And what happens is every year they run a seminar, and they've done it now for quite a number of years. And they had the habit of changing the theme of the seminar every year. But recently, they've kept the same theme over the last couple of years, and it's this, that cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. And I happen to totally agree with that. Cybersecurity really is everybody's responsibility. It's normally the view that cybersecurity is the IT guy. He's the guy that's looking after it, so I don't need to worry about it. Or it's the purchasing team. They're buying the kit in, they ought to know what they're buying. But that's not really the case. And hopefully when we get to the end of this, you come to realize why it's true that cybersecurity really is a shared responsibility when we think in terms of cybersecurity. So first of all, what is cybersecurity? When we hear the word cybersecurity, some people switch off. They think, oh, I'm not a techie, I'm not interested. Or you think maybe something Star Wars, it's cyber, so you're not interested. So let's lose cyber for a minute and just talk about what is security. We all understand that. We have home security, and we're talking about protecting really our assets or possessions from exploitation or theft. We get that. We understand what security is. If we think of the cyber aspect, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, it's anything that's involving or using or relating to computers, especially the internet. So when we think in terms of cybersecurity now, we're talking about protecting our data, protecting our computers, protecting our devices, really from exploitation or theft when using the internet. That is, for us, cybersecurity. Okay, so it's about protecting your data, protecting your machines, protecting your devices. Mobile phones are also computers now, really from exploitation when we use the internet. And if you're an internet user, really it's important, cannot be overstated. And you're all hooked up to me here over the internet, so it's important to all of us. Okay, the idea of cyber security. So let's consider first of all the cost of poor cybersecurity. Okay, if we think it's not important, just let it go. What could be the cost for you and for us? Well, if we just we look at a couple of examples here, you may know of the company Adobe. It's alleged that they lost 153 million user records that were stolen from them. And what did it cost them? $1.1 million in legal fees. So you see then that if we fail to look after our cybersecurity, it can expose us really to a very, very hefty fine. Okay, that's one of the things that we want to bear in mind, that we want to keep our cybersecurity up to a good state. We've heard of this company. It's alleged that they lost 165 million user records. The hacker really was offering the email address and passwords for sale at the time for about 5 Bitcoin when it was worth something. And this user or this hacker stood to gain about $1.6 million, or about 1.3 million pounds from exploiting this data. The other one is this company you also may have heard of. It's alleged that they lost $3 billion user records that were stolen off them. The impact on that company wiped off $350 million of their value. So what are we seeing when we think of poor cybersecurity or failure to maintain good cybersecurity? One, it could expose us really to legal fees. We could wind up being slapped with fines left, right, and center if we don't take care of it. Someone else can come in certainly and exploit our business, exploit our data, and really take advantage of all of our hard work. It could also destroy our company's value and image. Nobody wants to eat in a restaurant that's been condemned. So at the end of the day, it's very, very important that we maintain good cyber security. So what the current state of play in terms of attacks? Well, when we think of in terms of PCs, now PCs for us, PCs are everywhere. They're part of our lives now. You know, your mobile phone is a PC. So all of us are hooked up and exposed. What does this mean? Well, with the situation that we're under now with COVID in particular, the government website tells us that as of April, about half of most of the people who were employed said that they did some work from home. And out of these, the majority, about 86% of those, said that it was because of COVID. And the situation has gotten worse now. So what does that mean? We have situations like what we call bio devices, people who are now bringing their devices into the workplace or working on their devices at home, and those devices may have been exposed really unprotected to the internet, and now they're being hooked up to our network, or they're beginning to send data into our businesses. So this is a real risk, and this is why cybersecurity is so important. So as we said, we've got a lot of users connecting remotely, using things like RDP, using things like VPN. All of these are connections that people are now plugging into their business from home. And those people who are aware of how this technology works and the vulnerability in this technology are looking to exploit that opportunity. And we can look at it very much as it is almost a war. You have those of us over here who are trying to protect our assets and trying to keep it safe. You have those over here who are trying to exploit, infiltrate, and steal. And then you have companies like ours, Marsworth, wedged in the middle, protecting you guys from these guys. But it's very much something that we all need to take seriously. Sometimes we can get into the mindset of thinking really that we're too small, to worry about it. Nobody's interested in me, so I don't have to worry about cyber security. That's not really a strategy. If we think in terms of that way, it's only a matter of time before we suffer the negative effects and the bad effects really of being exploited or being compromised. I'll give you an example. I remember parking along a street and watching as I was parked, a young lady walked down the street and she was trying the door handle of every car that she walked down the street. Now, she wasn't interested in who the cars belonged to. She doesn't even know really what circumstances the families are in. What she's looking for is the opportunity to get into that car and take whatever is available. This is your hacker. He doesn't care whether you're a small business. He doesn't care whether you're a large business. He's an opportunist. His idea is to just be able to get in wherever that vulnerability is and take advantage of what he can. So cybersecurity is really important for all of us, irrelevant or irrespective of our size. It's something that we all need to think about. Just looking at some of the numbers, and I said we're not going to spend an awful lot of time with numbers here, but this is again from the government website. The government tells us that just short of half of all businesses, a quarter of all charities really reported cyber attack or some breach really within the last 12 months alone. So we can see that it is a big problem. The government recognizes that it's a big problem. And as we see, even charities, nobody is exempt from the dangers of cybersecurity. Also in Europe, they're recognizing too that the SMEs are facing increasing cyber threats really, and it's changing the digital landscape. And that was just really last month, they recognized that this is a growing problem and it's getting really almost beyond control. But we can do things to make sure that we are safe, and we're going to see some of these as we go through in our presentation, hopefully this morning. This is a quote from a company who specialize in cybersecurity, and what their observations have told them is simply this: is that 3% of the malware out there tries to exploit your hardware, your technical vulnerability. Okay, but 95 or 97% of it is actually focusing on you, the individual. So what does that mean? It means you're sitting in front of your computer, the things that you're going to bump into out there on the web, 3% of really looking to compromise your PC. But 97% of them are actually looking to compromise you. They're attacking you, the user. So it shows us that if we're a small operation, just one guy running a small business with one PC, it's just as important as having a multinational company with many, many PCs and many users. It's important to all of us. So what are some of the threats that are out there? Well, this is one that you might have heard of, the idea of phishing. And it's exactly what it says. It's they throw the line over and it just sits there and waits for someone to come along and take a bite. And that's general opportunist targeting, really. So that will come, as we'll see in a minute, through different forms. Then you have spear phishing. Now, spear phishing is a little bit more selective. This is specific targeting. My background is my grandfather owned a fishing business, and my uncles spent time in the sea. And when they said that they were going spear fishing, you know that they were going specifically for something. Okay, so in the case of phishing, they're targeting either a company or something very specific. Real phishing now is a very interesting one, because now this is targeting the higher ups in a company. And why? Because often these are the decision makers in the companies. These are the people who were signing off on projects, perhaps signing off on very large sums of money. And all of these threats come in either by web link through websites, they're coming by embedded links in emails, or intercepted email. An intercepted email is one that we've seen, it continues to grow. You find out what they will do is not change the mail, all they do is just change the account number. So the mail still looks absolutely authentic, but the account number has been changed and you've just paid somebody else that you don't know a large sum of money. Or you're expecting services that never come. Why? Because you've paid the wrong individual. Also now, coming onto the world scene is this idea of smishing. And this is an attempt to trick you, the user, again, into parting with your private information either through text or SMS. So they'll send you a series of texts and say, can you confirm here? We just want to make sure that this is you. And they'll actually face it with something that looks very legitimate. But the idea is to try to have to separate you from your private information. And then it's all driven largely by social engineering. And when we talk about social engineering, we need to understand that it is not a technical thing. Social engineering really is the art of exploiting psychology. They're exploiting you and your thinking. I'll give you an example. Just imagine you're standing outside of your company and a guy walks up to you and he's carrying 4 heavy boxes. And he says to you, can you get the door for me? So what do? You open the door and he goes in. And now you've just exposed your network or your business to someone. So he's used what you can see against you. It's a con. You think, for instance, they use, again, knowledge of what your preferences are. So you might be a big dog lover and you go to a website and it says, do you know that dogs are going extinct? Click here to support Dog Trust Charity, and you click it and you're hooked. So they are using your own thinking and your own preferences, your own psychology against you. That's the idea of social engineering. Now, this slide looks menacing and it was intended for that purpose. So if you hear the door closing and somebody running down the hallway, that is probably your IT guy when he saw this slide. But what this is Wannacry, and it infected 250,000 machines, in more than 150 countries, as you can see in the slide, back in 2017. It's described as the largest ransomware attack ever. The impact on the NHS, you can see down the bottom there, really, that it saw really a third of hospital trusts affected by this particular attack. It was estimated really to cost the NHS some £92 million after 19,000 appointments were actually cancelled as a result. Now, for an IT person, if you walk into an IT room and you see this on the screen, it does exactly what it says on the tin. You want to cry, because you know that it's going to be a long day. Chances of you recovering this information is almost zero. Not without paying some money. And even when you pay, there's no guarantee that you'll get your data back. What's interesting about this particular attack, though, however, is that this is where we're going to try to keep this really tech light, as we say, but it's worth knowing that this particular attack exploits really a protocol, which is called the server message block 1.0. And the vulnerability of that was actually declared a year ahead of this outbreak. So what do we see? We see that poor cybersecurity left a lot of these businesses exposed to exploitation. A year before this came out, it was already flagged that this was a security risk. So this is the importance of paying attention to your cyber security. So let's look at some of the things that we will consider as best practice, what you can do. It's all very well knowing that there's loads of problems out there, but you want to know how you can deal with them. You want to know certainly, how you can shore up your business, how you can shore up your PCs and your phones and other likes. So what can you do? Well, as a starter, you can make sure that you have adequate antivirus and malware protection on your PC. And I tagged at the end there that it's up to date. There's no point in installing antivirus, which is 10 years old, and still think that it's going to protect you. It doesn't know about Wannacry, hasn't got a clue, okay, about that. It will just sell you down the river. So you want to make sure that your antivirus is up to date. And what do we mean by up to date? Well, you want an antivirus that's talking to a database in the cloud, so that as vulnerabilities come out, it literally updates itself and throws that information down to your antivirus, and your antivirus is always current. That's what you want to make sure that you have. Also, too, you can make sure that we can make sure that we have strong passwords, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. And again, this is a start. And why do we say it's a start? Well, you've got 28 uppercase, 28 lowercase, 10 numbers maybe by default, maybe top whack. People use 5, 6 special characters. People who want to compromise your data, these hackers, they understand that. So that's a start to have really a strong password. But the standards today now is having a 15-character password. This is what Microsoft is saying. You want to have this as a minimum. You're saying to yourself, how am I going to remember 15 characters? I find it difficult to remember 7. Well, the practice now is to use unfamiliar words. So, skiing, holiday, Switzerland, wherever the case may be. Use 3 familiar words to you. Make it mean something to you, and you can throw some special characters in if you want as well, and some numbers. But the idea is to build 3 unfamiliar words. That will get you up to your 15 characters. You can make it longer if you want, but the goal is something that you can remember, and you don't share it with anybody. That's very important. Next up, we can do what's called MFA, multi-factor authentication. And what this means is your password is one layer, but also there's another layer of authentication which will protect you. So if your password is compromised, somebody has your password, the second layer will actually send you a prompt. And perhaps some of you have already experienced it. I noticed that PayPal now is using it on their login sites. That what happens when you log in now, it sends you a note to your phone, asks you to authenticate that it is you. So that's another layer of security. You can actually do that, make sure that's happening for you. And also too, patching. And now, when we think in terms of patching, we mean make sure that your machines, your PCs, your phones, your servers are all up to date. When we see a Windows update, we tend to bury our head sometimes on our hand, think, oh, no, another one. This is number 3,765. We don't want to think like that. A little bit of history might bring it into perspective here, is that when the industry started, the computer industry started very early on, they implemented a little bit of self-regulation, which has stood in play even to today. And what that means is that if you release a piece of software, you had the responsibility to release any vulnerabilities that you know exist in that software. So you had to make it public. So what they did was create these teams of people who would test the software. So you release a piece of software, these guys go at it, test it, and they would report back and say, yes, there's a vulnerability here, there are other ones. But sadly, the machine became aware, as they say. The question was, well, why are you going to find these vulnerabilities and tell them about it? Let's find the vulnerabilities and exploit it ourselves. And so was born the unscrupulous hacker. So these people are testing the software, looking for vulnerabilities, and the companies like Microsoft and the likes of Apple or whoever they are, they're continually having to release patches to patch that software to make sure that it continues to be safe. So when you get an update, you may want to perhaps go online and read about the update, see what it's doing, because sometimes you can release an update that actually doesn't work very well for you. So you want to check that update, but you want to make sure that you install your updates, patch your systems, patch your phones, and make sure that you are secure. If you're running a network, and this can also be done for a standalone PC also, but the idea of principle of least privilege, what does that mean? It means that you give people access only to what they need. There's no point in the dinner lady having access to the accounts. What's the point? You see, you don't want that. You want to make sure that people can only access what they need to access. That way, you can contain a breach if it does, if you do experience one, or you can be able to narrow down where that breach actually occurred, because you can see where the problem actually developed. If you're a standalone user, you're a small business, just one person, and you've got one PC, you can run a couple of accounts on it. You can have an admin account, which you never use, but you can have a user account, which doesn't let you install anything, really, or change the system. So, and that way you're running very safe. And when you need to make updates, you can log in as your administrator account and make the necessary changes that you need. So it can be done even from the very small guy, the one-man business, all the way up to the corporates. Now, firewalls, it does, again, exactly like it says, it is like a fire blanket. It protects you from the threats that are coming in from the outside world. And we're talking about managed firewalls. And what a managed firewall is, it means that you can change what happens to your network. It controls what happens to your network. So for instance, if you don't want people watching YouTube on your network, through your managed firewall, you can block all that. If you don't want people going on certain sites on your network, you can block all that. If you don't want certain types of files coming in, you can block that. That's a managed firewall. And the advantage of having a managed firewall means that as your business grows and security requirements change, then your firewall can change also. So it's very important to think in terms of that. And then there are the backups. Backups, backups, backups. Say it with me. Backups, backups, backups. This is important. This is your last line of defense. Backup. If all goes south, this is what will get you out of the woods. It's quite often that we see people who have very important data and no backup. You can go out and buy a new PC, but you can't go out and buy a new data. Your data is gone, it's gone. So backups are very, very important. And when you think in terms of backups, we wanted to be thinking in terms of not just backing up to one device, but normally we use what's called grandfather, father, son idea, which means that we have an older version, maybe 6 months worth of data stacked away. Then we have something a little bit more recent, a month's worth of data stacked away, and then we're backing up every day. That means that if we're compromised, we can build our business back in no time. I'll give you an experience. I had a friend of mine rung me up on a Saturday morning. He says, I've been hacked. And his machine certainly was ransomware attacked. Just one machine, all the other machines were off. But he sadly had access, administrator access to the network in the sheer data compromise. Fortunately, he had a good friend who told him about backups, and he was able to recover and rebuild his business and get it back up and running in 2 hours. So it shows you that backups are the things that will get you out of the woods. So if you can, make sure, forget if you can, do it, okay? Make sure that you have backups, backups, and more backups. On top of that, vigilance. Now, if something looks out of the ordinary, it probably is. Okay, so check everything. I'll give you an example from really one of our clients. We had a phone call from a PA, and she said, I've got a spam email here from my boss. So we had a look at it, looked pretty okay. We were speaking to her, we said, well, why do you say that this is spam? She said, I'm telling you, this is spam. So we did what we always do, deep dive, look at all the headers, fantastic. Turned out she was absolutely right. Came out of Mexico, some obscure place. We were able to take the necessary steps, dealt with it. She was absolutely happy, the company's fine. But I went back to her and I said to her, well, what actually told you that this was spam? And she said, my boss never says thank you for anything. So just imagine that they had all the backups, they had all the firewall, they had all the MFA. And the one thing that picked it up was somebody being vigilant. So the moral of the story is treat your staff terrible is a good cybersecurity policy. No, that's not the idea. The idea really is that we need to be vigilant, and it's everyone's responsibility. The person who picked up on this was not the IT team. This was the PA. So that's why cybersecurity is important and the responsibility of everybody in the company. If it looks out of the ordinary, then it probably is. Check it out. In terms of mobile phones, if you're using your mobile phone, certainly never leave your mobile phone unlocked. You know, if you have, for instance, if you haven't got security tools on there, you want to make sure that you engage them. Things like if you have an iPhone, Find My Phone, that's important. Webroot's also very important. A package of tools available for Android phones, and so antivirus and the like. You want to make sure that you have your devices shored up, antivirus and the likes. So let's say that you've done everything and you think, okay, I'm okay. Is there any signs that I can look for perhaps that will indicate that I have been compromised? What can I look for? Well, perhaps if you're on your PC, your browser starts to develop a mind of its own. What does that mean? You try to go to a page, it goes elsewhere. It starts popping up one particular site, keeps routing to some place other than where you want it to go. That's telling you something. Pop-ups. All of a sudden, you start getting a lot of pop-ups on your workstation. This too is telling you that perhaps you've been compromised and you want to look at that. Unexplained software icons. So you arrive at your machine, you look at it, and all of a sudden you've got icons that weren't there previously. That is also a point of alert. You want to pay attention to that. Interrupted email traffic. What do I mean? You send a mail, the person never gets it. They send a reply, you never get it. That's a flag. You want to make sure you understand what's going on here. Could be that somebody's intercepting your mail, you see. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that also. Also to things like online passwords, they don't work anymore. You go to a site that you go to all the time, you put the password in, doesn't work. You know, what you want to do is you want to investigate that. You want to make sure you change your passwords as soon as you can, things of that nature. Also, unusual screen activity. You find that you're sitting in front of your computer, all of a sudden your mouse starts to drift across the screen. You're thinking, hello, what's going on here? Or perhaps a couple of windows started closing or opening. You know that it's time for you to switch your machine off and get it checked out. Also, you want to make sure things like your antivirus and anti-malware, if they keep disabling themselves, that often too is a red flag. Missing money on data, well, that's telling you certainly that you've been breached. So you want to absolutely, without any delay, jump on that. Also, you find that you've been notified that someone has hacked your email account or hacked your account. They send you your password. This is quite popular now. Just a word of caution here, in the sense that quite often these mails come out. Again, it's a kind of phishing, but it also can be very true, especially if they sent you your password and you think that is my password, and panic's going to come in. I had a friend of mine ring me up and he said, look, this is what's happened. And I said to him, well, okay, where do you use this particular password? He says, I only ever use it one place. And I said, and he told me where this place was. And that's indicated that he wasn't the one who was compromised at all. it was the company that he was trading with that was compromised, and they got his data. So he was compromised because they were compromised. So it doesn't always mean that you have been compromised literally on your machine. Somebody else that you're trading with could have been compromised. One of your friends could have been compromised. So you want to also consider the bigger picture when you think that you might have been compromised or exposed to a virus or some kind of attack. And then you receive a ransomware message. Well, that will definitely tell you that you've been compromised. The fact is that people will then say you can't get access to your machine, you can't log in, you can't get any access to your files, they don't work anymore. Then yeah, you need to start getting some, you want to reach out to somebody certainly like Marsworth, or certainly your IT team, or somebody who can deal with this problem for you. Because if you have been struck by ransomware, it is one of the most devastating things that you can experience from a loss of data perspective. Chances are you will never get that data back again. And as I said, the only thing that will save you often is your backup. Okay. So moving on to what are our responsibilities. You are a small business, you are a lone business guy, but what are your responsibilities because you're handling data? Well, talking about GDPR, what really does it mean really for cybersecurity? It's important to note that GDPR is really binding on companies, not particularly on an individual. Okay, so if you're trading and you're handling people's data, you need to know about this, and you need to know what your responsibilities are from an IT perspective and trafficking data across the internet. And this is a lift from the government website, perhaps to give you some bearing of what is expected if you are a person handling data or anyone's data on the internet. It says GDPR requires really that personal data must be processed securely using appropriate technical and organizational messages. What does this mean? Or measures, what does that mean? It means really that they expect you to be doing something. That's what they're saying. So it's not good enough to say somebody else is going to worry about it. That is not acceptable. The regulation does not mandate, as it says, a specific set of cybersecurity measures, but rather expects you to take appropriate action. So they're not going to tell you what computers to buy. They're not going to tell you what firewalls to buy. They're not going to tell you what antivirus to buy, but they expect you to do something. In other words, you need to manage your risk. So what is appropriate for you? Well, it would depend on your circumstances, how much data you're handling, all that sort of stuff, and what you're processing. That will determine what the risk actually is. But however, it says that there is an expectation that you have minimal established security measures in place. They expect us to have something in place. And this perhaps puts it all into perspective when you think of assembling your IT environment in line with cybersecurity. It says here really the security measures must be designed into your systems at the outset. So it is not an afterthought when you think of cybersecurity. Okay, I'm going to buy all my machines now for my company. Now I'm going to think about cybersecurity. No, you do it when you're considering the idea of buying all your machines. If you can afford 30 machines, I don't know, buy 28 and buy yourself decent antivirus, and buy yourself a decent firewall. That's the point. But it has to go in when you're thinking about your IT infrastructure, and you have to maintain it all the way through the system's life. That's what the government expects of you as a business person handling data. You have to make sure that it is protected. You have to make sure that you do everything in your power to protect it, and you have to think about it from the outset. That's what they're saying. So where can you get help? Now that you know what's expected, you know what you're up against, is there anywhere you can go to get some help? Well, again, these are lifts from the government website. There's the small business guide, really to cybersecurity. You can get that from the government website. They'll be able to supply you with that information. Also, you can get your business, as we said, this course or this information is really designed across the essential certification. So it's considered that, so you can get your business cyber essential certified. And that will give your clients and the people that you're dealing with confidence that you're taking cybersecurity seriously, you understand it, and you know what it's actually about. As a company, whether you're small, as I said, or a very large company, the government has actually employed or seconded IASME, who funnel or look after cybersecurity in terms of small businesses. Those are the people that the government's using to make sure that small businesses and and large businesses alike actually get the sort of support and care that they need in terms of cyber security. So if you're a small business, they can assign you a small partner to help you grow, and as your business grows, they can assign you a larger partner. Okay, and ultimately, if you want help with any of this, then reach out to Marsworth. We love you. We'd love to help you out. We're here to make sure certainly that you are safe. That's our assignment, and that's what we do, and we do it very, very well. Okay, so now we're going to move our attention to our Q&A, and this is going to be taken for you by my dear friend Paul Salter, who is part of the Marsworth team. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Junior. That was really insightful and really helpful. Lots of useful advice there. So yeah, welcome to Paul, who's going to be answering some of your questions today. So let me have a look and see what questions we've got coming through. Okay, so first question, how safe would you say are password saving sites, ones that allow you to store all of your passwords under one roof? I think they're called password managers, aren't they? What are your views on those?
Hi, well, that's a really interesting question, and it's one that most people don't agree on. The NCSE offer some advice on that subject, and they are very much in favour of password safes, although if you read their documentation carefully, they do steer clear of recommending anything in particular, and their current advice actually is to use the inbuilt stuff within your browser, so Chrome or Safari, but password managers are certainly, I actually think, a really good way of protecting that sort of information. It is a bit like, sticking the crown jewels in one place, and you are reliant on their security. There's a few things you should consider if you are doing that. One is make sure that you've got a means of getting back at that information, so an unlock method, so you've got a mobile phone registered with it and an email address that are separate. Make sure that you use some form of multi-factor authentication. So you would need to have an app or a text message or even an email as a second method of getting you into that. So somebody guesses your master password, they can't get in. And the key piece of advice they give you is don't use the same password for the master password as you use for anything else. And indeed, that goes the same for email, actually. Always make sure your email password is different to every other password, because that's the quickest way to get a password reset. We've all done it. You can, once you've got the email password, you can get any other password reset. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you. Will the slides be made available? Yes, I think probably we should be able to share the slides on our website. Is that okay with you guys and with Lucy?
Yeah, happy to give you a PDF of that. That's not a problem.
Fantastic. Is there a good virus and malware package for Macs versus PC?
I'll steer clear of product recommendations, because they're all good at some things. The major vendors all do options for Macs, and I think I think the general advice is go for a known name. So one of the bigger players in the market, Sophos, Symantec. There's some newer players out there now used in the corporate environment, Silence, Carbon Black. The real difference when you're looking at antivirus products is to look at what it does. There's two main types on the market now. There's the basic antivirus, which will do things like checking for known signatures. So if somebody has reported a virus and the virus company know about it, they will recognize it. And then there's the other type of antivirus, which is slightly more advanced, and it looks at patterns of behavior. So if it sees vast quantities of files being changed or something like that, it will take action and intervene. And some of them, Sophos, InterceptX, and I think some others will then give you the option to roll back that change as well. But specifically, I won't give it a direct recommendation for any product, but if you look at the major players, those are really where to start.
And they do have versions for Macs.
Many do, yes, many do.
That's great. How can you back up personal information that can't be stored online due to GDPR?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure that GDPR specifically says you can't store stuff online. I think the requirement is that it's stored securely and safely. There are lots of ways of obviously backing up, and it depends on what you're backing up. If you're backing up stuff from a PC, that's pretty simple to back up to an external disk or to to a device like that. The traditional methods for offline backup would be tape, and that's a viable option for people who've got servers and corporate infrastructure. But realistically, for personal users or for smaller entities, the options are realistically USB disks or external devices like that. And you can get, you can get plug-in devices. I think it's called an RDX cartridge, which is basically it's effectively a plug-in disk that plugs into your computer, but effectively it is a hard disk that you back up to. But I'd need a bit more specific information to give you a specific method for that.
Okay, what about MS OneDrive? Is that considered to be a strong backup?
That's a really good question. Yes and no is the answer. OneDrive is great, and if you delete something from there, you should be able to recover it within 30 days, and that's brilliant. However, and you can also do versioning on that, and that's a fantastic thing. If you find something that's got corrupted, you can go back lots of different versions, and that's brilliant, but it's not backup as such. A lot of people consider it sufficient, and that's a matter for personal choice. But if a problem or a file's been deleted over 30 days previously, then you will struggle to get that back. If something is deleted maliciously and the backup copies are deleted as well, you don't have that. There are lots of products out there that will do a secondary backup of OneDrive, and I think the question is, how valuable is the data to you? What is the impact to your business of losing that? And if you can't withstand the loss, then you should put something else in place.
Okay, what about changing passwords regularly? Isn't that a cybersecurity practice one should implement?
Okay, lovely questions. Again, lots of schools of thought on this one. NCSE are the National Cybersecurity Centre, so the UK experts are pushing us away from regular password changing because they say it causes problems with people forgetting them and resetting them. They push you towards using a password safe of sorts, although they do steer clear of recommending cloud ones, although I think many people use them very successfully. The real thing is that passwords should not be considered as secure on their own. So Junior made a big point of multi-factor authentication, and I can't really repeat that often enough. The password is great, but it can be compromised. The longer the password, the better. We do regularly see lists of emails from on the dark web with compromised passwords, and so changing your password periodically does protect you against some of these historic breaches. So, for example, put your email address into one of these tools, and it will probably come back with some passwords you've used over the last 10 years. And using a password that old is probably wrong. Changing it every week is going to cause problems because you'll forget it. There's a happy medium somewhere between 3 months and 6 months, perhaps, where for passwords that are used where there is not a second method of authentication, that they probably should be changed. That's a personal view.
Okay, but above all, install multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't rely on passwords alone.
Yeah. Okay. I'm currently working with an external business as a project manager, and I'm not able to access their internal shared drives for storing and sharing documents. What's the best and most secure alternative to use?
Okay, really interesting. Personally, we tend to advise people to use the bigger players in the market, store that sort of stuff within the Microsoft environment or within the Google business products. It's probably safer, but I have to say, if it's client data that you're storing and you're storing it for and on behalf of them, they should be giving you that advice, because it needs to fit in with their cybersecurity policies. But if you're an independent person, then putting it on somewhere like SharePoint, ensuring you've got multi-factor authentication and strong passwords in, or OneDrive if it's personal data, is usually considered a reasonable set of precautions to take.
Okay, now coming back to a GDPR question. One of the challenges relating to GDPR is that we should only keep personal data for a specified length of time. What's the best way to remove this from backups?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. It depends how long you keep your backups for. Is the short answer, and you can't. So your data will die with the backup retention policy that you choose. Now, I know some people keep financial data for 7 years. You have a legal requirement to keep it for 7 years. Therefore, you are perfectly entitled, as I understand it, and we're not legally trained, but as I understand it, if you're required to keep the data, you're required to keep the data. It's setting an appropriate retention policy for the backups and for that data. And it may not be the same for all parts of the data. It may be you choose to back up your financial system separately, and that does have the 7-year retention, and where you've got information in there such as client names and addresses, then I think that would be reasonable to keep for that period of time, subject to obviously checking that was the case. But you can't, once you back something up, very easily pull something out of it. So you need to set a retention policy on the backups appropriate to the data you're doing in the first place.
Okay. Now, as somebody thinking of upgrading to Windows 10 Pro, what's your view of how friendly Bitlocker is?
Okay, that's a really good question. Disk encryption, I don't think we touched on, but it's if you're storing your information on a laptop and your laptop is stolen, it's very, very easy to pull the disk out, put it into a reader, and take the information off it. Bitlocker is the Windows built-in software that would encrypt that disk for you. And if you're storing personal or PII information on your laptop and carrying it around with you, then I think you have a responsibility to make sure that that's encrypted. Bitlocker is industry standard. It is a very good product. There are 2 things to bear in mind when doing it. Make sure you've got a backup of the key, because it cannot be broken into if something changes on the machine, and make sure it's not stored on the machine, obviously, because you need to be able to get it. So they give you an option to save it to OneDrive often, which is quite a good option. And the other thing to remember with I've lost my train of thought here. So it's the encryption. To make sure you've got the key, and make sure it's well, let's stick with making sure we've got the key.
Make sure you've got a key. Okay.
Yeah,
and so Bitlocker comes as standard with Windows 10 Pro, does it?
Windows 10 Pro, yeah, it's you can turn it on and off for the disk, and you can also do that for external disks as well, which is a useful thing to be able to do. But if you've got personal PII data on your laptop, you really should be looking at some form of encryption on there.
Okay. Does Norton protect from malware as well as virus?
Okay, Norton is home user product, but it depends on the version you're getting. I'm not 100% au fait with the home user products, but generally the product's split into two different versions. There are those that do definition based, and those they call either next generation, or they sometimes call them heuristic or machine or AI type products, which will do both. Most vendors have options in both spheres, and you can generally tell by the price bracket which one's which.
Okay. What backup programs would you recommend for a small business with just one PC?
Okay, really interesting. We use some cloud-based ones. We use Acronis, which have their own cloud provider. We use Altaro, but there's also those are useful because they can have UK-based data retention, and if you've got a requirement to keep data in the UK, that's helpful. There's products that will do it just to a PC, but those two would be absolutely adequate.
Brilliant. Now coming back to the questions on Apple, do you actually need an antivirus software on Apple products?
It's a really frequently asked question. Yes, is the short answer. There are less viruses that go around with Apple products, but if you think about how the web's developing, a lot of stuff is run through HTML now, so it runs cross systems. So it runs within a browser. There are, although a lot less, there are viruses that affect Macs. I think if you are, again, holding data or information that is meant to be in some sense secure, addresses, names, people, you have a responsibility to take reasonable steps, and I think that would be considered a reasonable step to take.
Okay, right, another one that says, thank you for the great presentation. Another question on GDPR. So this business is hosted by a company in the EU. They don't seem to know anything about contracts required once we leave the EU. So should they be changing their hosting? They have a fairly complicated site and would prefer not to.
That's a really, really interesting question, and I don't think any of us can answer that at the moment. I think there is an expectation that if your data is within the EU, it's probably okay in the short term, and we'll need to know what happens in the longer term. I think if it's outside the EU, people are already getting a bit concerned about that. There's still the ongoing discussions about whether safe harbor and things in the US are appropriate protections. I think, given the timescales, you're not going to be able to do anything before the end of the month. So realistically, it's not an option open to you now, and hopefully the picture will be clearer come the new year, although I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay, on that happy thought. Right, there's often discussion about the safest email providers to use. Is Gmail still relatively safe?
Okay, nothing is safe, and they're all subject to the hacks. We saw last couple of days a big US cybersecurity firm getting hacked. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anybody. Is it reasonable to use Gmail for business use? Absolutely. Is it reasonable to use Microsoft? Absolutely. I think it's the question is not are they safe, but is it reasonable to assume that is a product that you should use? And the answer is yes.
Right, so we're running out of time now. You've been helping us an awful lot with these question and answers. Let's just add one more last question, but I'm just wondering whether, if we do have other questions, whether we could send them through to you so that you could answer them for us.
Be delighted.
Yeah. So just a final question. Could you just tell us what the difference is between two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication?
Okay, not a lot is the short answer. Multi-factor authentication is a generic term. Two-factor authentication just means you're doing two things. Multi could mean there's three things. But two-factor, multi-factor are actually generally used interchangeably.
Okay, that's brilliant. Right, so I think we'll call the questions to a close now, and it just remains to say thank you to both Junior and to you, Paul, for this very useful, I think, webinar and question and answer session. Clearly, there's a lot of interest in this, and we really do need to be thinking about it seriously. So we hope that everybody listening in found it useful. I think you probably have done. And all I can say now is just thanks again to Junior and to Paul, and we look forward to seeing everybody again, hopefully at the next webinar, which is next Thursday on the semiotics of racism. And bye to everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye, guys.